Welcome to Global Fest, Europe. The earliest Europeans are thought to have migrated to various locations as part of a Western migration of Indo-European tribes of people thought to have their origins from the Steppes Plains region near the Caucasus Mountains in Central Asia, around 1000 BCE. Most languages in Europe today are of Indo-European origin. Major contributions to European civilizations include the Phoenicians, a group of seafaring traders who created what is thought to be the world's first phonetic alphabet. The Phoenicians emerged around 800 BCE and spread westward from Syria to Lebanon, establishing city-states throughout the Mediterranean. The Phoenicians established port cities roughly 17 miles apart, about a one-day journey by ship, with the most famous located at Carthage in modern-day Tunisia. The Phoenicians influenced many other emerging cultures due to trade across the Mediterranean, including the Minoans and early Greeks, and had contact with Egyptian culture as well. The Phoenicians also made ships for Middle Eastern civilizations like the early Assyrians. Between 1150 and 800 BCE, the ancient Greeks emerged, united by a common language and culture, and developed beliefs centered around a pantheon of Olympian gods. The Greeks will reach their height during the classical civilization period during the 500s to 300s BCE, developing the polis, or Greek city-states, throughout the eastern Mediterranean. The early Greeks, and then later the Romans, helped make up what is now referred to as classical civilizations and Western civilization. The city-states were independent from one another, with the most prominent ones including Sparta and Athens, each developing a unique way of life and government. Many Greek city-states were oligarchies, ruled by a small class of elite rich people. Sparta had a military-based society under a monarchy. Helots were forced to produce food for Spartan people. Athens experimented with many types of government, including tyranny, oligarchy, aristocracy, and even democracy during the height of Greek culture, often called the Golden Age of Athens, in the 400s BCE, under a leader named Pericles. Slavery was a common practice across Greece. Greek culture heavily influenced other emerging European civilizations later on, including the Romans. Perhaps the greatest influence on other cultures includes Greek philosophy. Notable Greek philosophers include Socrates, who lived between 469 and 399 BCE, Plato, who was Socrates' student, who lived between 428 BCE and 347 BCE, and Aristotle, who was Plato's student, as well as Alexander the Great's tutor, who lived between 384 and 322 BCE. The ancient Greeks fought many wars against the Persians and were able to defeat them in many battles as part of the famous Persian Wars. Much of early Greek history is recounted through oral tradition from storytellers like Homer, who created epic stories like the Odyssey and the Iliad. Greek architecture continues to be used today, most notably the use of columns in buildings, including Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian styles. Famous Greek writers include Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, and the father of history named Herodotus, who wrote extensively about the Persian Wars. It is often said that the roots of Western civilization are Greek. The Greeks were absorbed by a Greek-loving Macedonian named Alexander the Great, who conquered much of the known world after coming to power in 300 BCE, following years of civil wars between the city-states, including the Peloponnesian Wars, won by the Spartans with help from their ancient enemy, the Persians. Alexander the Great not only conquered the Greek city-states, but helped blend cultures from the places he conquered, including parts of South Asia, like North India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, Persia in the Middle East, as well as Egypt in northern Africa. This blending of Greek or Hellenic culture with other cultures became known as Hellenistic culture or Greek-like culture. The Greeks and Alexander the Great also influenced the ancient Romans between 500 BCE and 476 Common Era. The Romans emerged on the Italian peninsula, not far from Greece. The early Romans eventually established a republic around 509 BCE, with its people choosing their leaders. Under the Roman Republic, the most powerful governing body was the Senate, led by upper-class people called patricians. Additionally, there were 2 consuls or elected officials to help run businesses and government. Other people in Roman society included the plebeians, which included merchants, farmers, army members, and traders, and who also had very little political power. The Roman Republic established a system of laws for all to see on great stone carvings in the Roman Forum. These laws of the 12 tables helped provide the basis for future European laws. Additionally, the Romans made major architectural contributions, including Roman-style rounded arches used in the creation of aqueducts and other buildings like the Colosseum in Rome. The Romans also made improvements to the dome, as seen by the Pantheon building. The Romans developed one of the world's most extensive road systems. The Romans will eventually begin to expand their territory, establishing an empire around 270 BCE, conquering much of the Mediterranean area, including North Africa, Western Europe, and parts of Southwest Asia. The Roman Empire will have a series of emperors until its demise, including Julius Caesar, who came to power in 48 BC and greatly expanded Roman territory through conquest. Caesar was murdered by fellow senators, and eventually his nephew will come to power, eventually called Augustus. Augustus helped usher in a 200-year period of Roman peace known as Pax Romana, or Roman peace. The Roman Empire fell for many reasons, including its size and the use of mercenary soldiers in its army who had little fidelity towards Roman life. The empire also suffered from a series of corrupt and insane emperors who cared more about self-aggrandizement instead of the stability of their citizenry. Eventually, the Roman Empire was divided between the eastern and western portions, and were further divided by how Christianity was being practiced. Christianity emerged around 25 CE, but didn't really become the official religion of the Roman Empire until it was adopted by Emperor Constantine in the 300s. Christianity emerged from Judaism based on the teachings and life of Jesus Christ. The Christian holy book is the Bible, with an Old and New Testament. By 476 CE, the western portion of the Roman Empire fell, and the Western Church, or Catholic Church, will take hold there throughout the Middle Ages. The eastern portion of the Roman Empire survived, eventually becoming known as the Byzantine Empire, with a capital established by Emperor Constantine as Byzantium, or Constantinople, in 330 CE. Constantinople's strategic location made it the crossroads of the world in terms of trade from Europe and Asia. The Byzantine Empire combined Greek, Roman, and Christian influences, and later had a huge impact on Russian civilization. The Byzantine Empire reached its peak under Emperor Justinian, who ruled between 527 and 563 CE as an autocratic ruler. Justinian nearly recovered the western portion of the Roman Empire, however, was unable to fully realize this goal. In addition to conquest, Justinian is remembered for updating Roman laws under his own legal code, which became known as Justinian's Code. He glorified Constantinople by preserving Roman building styles, and his architectural feats included the building of the Hagia Sophia Church, the Hippodrome, and the famous road in Constantinople called the Messe. Justinian was married to an influential woman named Theodora, who inspired Justinian to continue ruling with an iron fist, even during a period of time in which his citizens were turning against him. She helped him orchestrate assassinations of his rivals by luring them to the Hippodrome and then having them slaughtered. Justinian also began practicing a new form of Christianity in his empire, which eventually became known as Orthodox Christianity, although an official break did not occur until around 1054 CE, which is also known as the Great Schism. Other Byzantine influences included mosaic artwork and an emphasis on the use of the Greek language instead of Latin. The Byzantine Empire's greatest influence was on early Kievan Russia. The Russians adopted Orthodox Christianity following the conversion of early Slavs near modern-day Ukraine. Missionaries like Saint Methodius and Cyril helped spread Orthodox Christianity. Saint Cyril wrote down the Russian language using the Byzantine Greek-based alphabet, effectively creating the modern Russian alphabet, which is named after him today, the Cyrillic alphabet. The Russians will also eventually adopt autocratic or absolute leaders called czars or Caesars, meaning emperor, even referring to their own kingdom as the Third Rome. These czars will adopt many Byzantine Orthodox building styles, including the onion domes in Russian architecture, like those seen at St. Basil's Cathedral. The Byzantine Empire reached its height under Justinian, but continued to decline and weaken until its eventual fall to the Ottoman Turks in 1453. Although the eastern portion of the Roman Empire survived under the Byzantine Empire until 1453, the western portion fell into what many historians have termed as the Dark Ages portion of the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages in Europe refer approximately to the years 500 CE to 1350 CE, and the first 500 years of this period are often called the Dark Ages. Between 400 CE to 700 CE, warring tribes divided Western Europe, including the Visigoths. From these warring tribes emerged a powerful group of people called the Franks. One of the Frankish leaders, Clovis, converted to Christianity. The Franks established an empire across much of modern-day Western Europe and held back advancing Muslim armies from Spain at the famous Battle of Tours in 732. The most famous Frankish king was Charlemagne, who was crowned as Holy Roman Emperor. Charlemagne's Carolingian Empire was the precursor to the future Holy Roman Empire and helped strengthen the Western Roman, or Catholic, Church. After Charlemagne's death in 814 CE, his empire fell apart, leading to decentralized rule throughout Western Europe and the eventual rise of loosely based or decentralized kingdoms and a political and social system called feudalism, as well as an economic system called manorialism. With kings too weak to keep out invaders from their kingdoms, they enlisted the help of people through a complex exchange of land ownership and protection, which came to be known as feudalism. Under the feudal system, kings gave pieces of land called fiefs to people who were given noble titles. In exchange for this land, these nobles agreed to protect the land for the king and created their own armies of knights, as well as built castles on their land. These nobles and knights would protect the common people. Knights lived by a code of chivalry, promising allegiance to their heavenly lord, their earthly lord, and their fair ladies. The peasants who lived on the lord's manor were part of a self-sufficient economic structure called the manor system, or manorialism. Everything that was needed for that community was produced right on the manor. In exchange for living and working on the manor, peasants were protected from attack by the lord and his knight, or knights. This complex social structure will survive in Western Europe until well after the end of the Middle Ages in Europe. During the Middle Ages, in addition to the feudal system and manor system, life revolved almost exclusively around the Catholic Church in Western Europe. The Church provided a stabilizing effect on people's lives and was closely aligned with the rule of kings in Western Europe. The Church had its own set of laws called canon law, which people were expected to follow. At the head of the Church was the Pope, who was assisted by a clergy of archbishops, bishops, and local priests. Every manor had a church and a local priest who helped collect church taxes, called a tithe. Local priests were also in charge of religious education and helped keep local histories by recording births and deaths. Failure to adhere to church law could result in excommunication, which was essentially a guarantee to hell in the afterlife. So clearly the church provided not only spiritual guidance to people during the Middle Ages, but also served important social and political roles as well, and had a great deal of power over kings, in that they helped legitimize their rule. The church also established monasteries to train priests, as well as convents for women to become nuns. During the Middle Ages, this was often an opportunity for women to learn to read and write. Unfortunately, the rise of Christian Western Europe during the Middle Ages often resulted in persecution of people of other faiths and general intolerance for those who had different beliefs. This intolerance included anti-Semitism or prejudice against Jews. European society continued to advance during the Middle Ages, but often at a slower pace than other parts of the world. Much of European culture during medieval times focused on Greco-Roman influences and preserved those traditions. Throughout most of the Middle Ages, Roman-style architecture was used. Toward the end of the Middle Ages, a new style of architecture emerged called Gothic. Many Gothic cathedrals were built throughout Europe during this time. During the Middle Ages, we will also start to see two emerging and competing nations in Europe, England and France. These early nation-states will have powerful kings and queens in power. In both England and France, legislative bodies will be set up during the Middle Ages to check the power of the king by nobles. These legislative bodies included Parliament in England and the Estates General in France. England will begin taking steps toward limiting the power of its monarch as early as the Middle Ages by establishing common law and forcing rulers to obey this law. King John was forced to sign a document called the Magna Carta, or the Great Charter, in 1215, which stated that kings must obey the same laws as their subjects. During the early 1000s CE, Western Europeans fought a series of wars called the Crusades against Muslim Seljuk Turks, who had attacked Constantinople and had taken over Christian-controlled Holy Lands. The Western Church called on Western Europeans to assist the Eastern Byzantine Empire to prevent takeover by the Turks. In the 1050s, the Seljuk Turks attacked the Byzantine Empire. In 1095, Pope Urban II was asked for help by the Byzantine Patriarch, or administrator of the Eastern Orthodox Church. At the Council of Clermont, Pope Urban called on bishops to convince Western European kings to send troops to help repel the attack. The Crusades were fought over a 200-year period, with victories and losses for both the Christians and Muslims. Notable leaders during the Crusades included Saladin during the 1100s, who had helped to unite the Muslim world. The Christians failed to stop Saladin from claiming the Holy Land. Saladin showed great mercy towards those he conquered, allowing Christians to retain their faith in conquered territories. Notable European kings who attempted to reclaim the Holy Land included Richard the Lionhearted, who attempted to take back the Holy Land from Saladin in 1189 during the Third Crusade, but was unsuccessful. Ultimately, the Crusades were unsuccessful for Christians, and the Holy Land remained under Muslim control. The Crusades ushered in a new way of life for many Europeans who helped fight. Fighting had allowed many Western Europeans to see the world and increase their desire to trade. The resulting trade and cultural diffusion helped bring Western Europe out of the Dark Ages. The legacy of the Crusades, however, also included distrust between Christians and Muslims for generations. The impact of the Crusades also included an initial increase in the power of the Catholic Church, but also a decline in its influence as kings attempted to control the Church and their kingdoms. The Crusades helped to ultimately increase trade between the Eastern world and the Western world. This resurgence of trade helped the cities along the Mediterranean to grow rich. Great examples of this include the Italian city-states, led by cities like Venice. With the rise of a new business class of people, feudalism in Europe weakened. Europe will see life shifting from manor life to city life, with the emergence of large cities, trade fairs, craft guilds, and early European exploration led by the Portuguese in the 1400s. Thanks for listening to Part 1.